How's it? And welcome to another episode of Ride Bikes Be Happy, brought to you from my car. I'm Conrad Davies, and today we're going to talk a little bit about this new EU drone law, what you need to do to get legal, why it exists, and hopefully offer you a little bit of help to get it all sorted, because it's easier than you think it is. But first, let's roll that intro. This is my drive to Holtzminden every day. Looks pretty nice out, doesn't it? But don't be fooled, it's only 2 degrees out there. I'm pretty glad I got my drone license sorted out, but the weather hasn't really been playing along as far as getting some nice drone shots go. But soon it'll be summer, and we'll be shooting shots like this again. Welcome back to the workshop. Before we go on, please click the like button and hit the subscribe button, it helps me a lot. About 2 years back, the EU announced plans to roll out new drone laws for all of EU. And I was pretty pissed off. I think a lot of people around Germany felt the same way, because after all we had it pretty easy here. The drone laws were pretty loose. But in Denmark to the north, and more importantly Austria and Italy to the south, where we like to go on holiday with our mountain bikes, drone rules were pretty strict. So it's now 2021, and although the rollout had to be pushed back due to COVID-19 issues, as of December 31st, 2020, it has been illegal to fly a drone in Germany or in Europe without a drone license. But let's be honest, except for the minor inconvenience of having to register your drone, register yourself, take an online test, get your insurance sorted out, it actually hasn't been that difficult. And of course remember that C0 class drones, those are the ones that you can fly indoors, or the ones that weigh less than 250 grams, do not have to be registered, and you don't actually have to have a license to fly them. I also don't fly a drone over 900 grams, so I don't cover any of the other topics here. So the cool thing is that the drone laws are the same throughout Europe. So what was difficult before is that rules that applied in Germany didn't necessarily apply in countries like Denmark, for example. The rules there were far more strict, and this vice versa, obviously. Now there's one standardized set of rules, so it makes it much easier, especially if you're traveling with a drone throughout Europe. And obviously, having said that, the countries that had the very restrictive rules in place, like Denmark and Austria, now have much looser rules, or rules that make much more sense. So that's also good for us. Of course, the other upside is now that there are set rules in place, it's much easier for us as drone pilots to be able to argue with idiots. People are nosy, and people can do some pretty stupid stuff and be pretty aggressive sometimes. But it's easy now to just remain calm, pull out your drone license, show them that you've done the test, that you know the rules, and that you're allowed to be flying. And then obviously from the non-drone pilot side, it's obviously easier to find out the rules and to check whether what the dude with his drone flying over your house is not doing legally, and to call the authorities in and say, well, look, there's somebody actually doing something illegal and it needs to be stopped. So what do you need to know, what do you need to do, and what's in the test? Just as a tip, the first thing to do is to talk to your insurance provider, because that's the thing that's going to take the longest time. Chat to them, make sure that your Haftpflicht insurance or your personal liability insurance is up to date and also covers drones. You then need to go to the aviation authority in your country's website. Click on the drone link and then register yourself. You're basically going to go through a process of registering yourself, proving that you are you, uploading your identity card or whatever it is in your particular case. You will need to inform them of your insurance provider so that they can log that information. So once you and your drone are registered, the next thing to do is to start doing the learning material and get ready for the test. I'll go through the learning material in a second. Once you've finished the learning, you can then do a practice test. And once you've done the practice test, if you've passed that, it'll then prompt you and say, go and do the actual test. The test is a 40 question multiple choice, pretty simple and straightforward to go through. There are some trick questions in there. If you've done the reading material, you'll pretty much ace it. So what exactly do you need to learn? Here are some of the main points to just pay attention to as they're the ones that seem to come up in the questions most often. You're going to want to start by learning the terminology, and that'll be the first point in the learning material. So there are a couple of things to learn, like VLOS, visual line of sight, little abbreviations for things that will catch you out in the test if you don't know what they're about. One of the things to keep in mind at this point as well is that since there are the new EU laws, there's now no difference between private or commercial use of drone. The laws actually govern the weight of the drone, i.e. how much damage the drone could do if it hit somebody or if it hit somebody's property, and also the distance from people that you can fly a specific drone. So usually, basically, the smaller the drone, the closer to people you can fly. The larger the drone, the further away you have to stay from people. One of the big points is that you can't fly over crowds and you can't fly over personal property. You can basically fly over almost any public property as long as it's not an air restricted space, but you can't be flying over your neighbor's house because he can complain about that, and he has the right to complain about it because you're interfering with his privacy. So the drones themselves fit into 3 basic classifications, and then those are split into 5 categories. Classifications are more based on what the drone is used for. For example, a drone that can pick up a big payload, a smaller drone, or a drone that could, for example, carry people. Those create categories, and then those categories are then split up into 5 different classifications basically, and those classifications are more about the weight of the drone itself, the application, not the application of the drone, and then how close you can fly that drone to other people, so how much damage you could basically do if you crashed into other people with your drone. So the next section that you'll learn is more about who controls the skies over their country, or what the different states involved in the EU have to say about the drone rules and what regulations they could potentially change. Probably not the most important thing to learn, but it is fairly important. So have a look through it and make sure that you've got it down. No-fly zones are next, and that's really important. Like, pay attention to all the things that have to do with no-fly zones. Like my drone, for example, my little DJI Mavic Air will tell me if I'm trying to fly or take off in a restricted area and so on, but it doesn't tell you all of the restricted areas. So the ones that are registered military areas, airport, helipads connected to hospitals, those sort of things are in the software, but there are some other exceptions that you need to pay attention to. For example, nature conservation areas. It's not actually allowed to fly over nature conservation areas. So when you're driving into areas in the forest, or if you're riding into areas in the forest, pay attention to signboards, because this actually caught me out last year. I was flying in the first snow at the end of 2020 over a forest, and a forester came and told me I needed to land my drone because I was disturbing the wildlife, and he had a point. So just be aware of things like that. It's all in the learning material, and you can really learn a lot of stuff from that. The next important section is about safe operation and responsibility, personal responsibility. And while a lot of this is common sense, unfortunately common sense isn't so common. So it's in there, and it's a really big section. So go through it, check it out, especially what responsibility you need to take for your drone and what could happen if you crash or if you hurt somebody with your drone. And then the first major section ends with a bunch of material about safety, security, and privacy, Datenschutz as we have it in Germany. This section is very important. It's obviously things that are pretty self-explanatory, but the reality is that sometimes we don't think about all the things that we're talking about here. So flying over your neighbor's house, flying low to the ground, having your camera on. Your neighbor could complain, and he's within his rights to complain, so you could get in a lot of trouble if you don't adhere to these rules. Safety and security have to do with like everything down to carrying hazardous materials and bombs and stuff like that, which unfortunately people do with drones. I'm hoping that nobody watches this channel is too interested in dropping a bomb with a drone, but there's a big section about it, and they ask a lot of questions about it in the test itself, so make sure you're up to scratch on that. So once the first section is done, there are a couple of smaller sections on the website. One of the things that's in there that's quite important to look at is things that you might not think about, but that you could get in trouble for. Drinking and flying obviously is a no-no. You can't have one of those hold my beer and let's see how this goes moments. But also just taking headache pills and stuff like that. You also need to be aware that you are flying something that could harm somebody, so good to know that you shouldn't actually be popping a couple of ibuprofen and then flying your drone. Next is a section that seemed to come up more in the practice test than in the actual test for me, but the question of what responsibility do you have while flying your drone, in that what things do you have to observe? Things like dirt on the drone and things like that. I didn't even really think about that, but the reality is that you should check that as you took off you didn't snag a piece of grass and it's wrapped around one of your rotors or something like that. So it's good to check that out. And then that leads into a section of like maintenance and things that, again, I wasn't really worrying so much about, but it's good to think about the fact that things like the condition of your batteries and the rotor blades on your drone and things like that, those should be controlled all the time, looked at, make sure that everything is in good working condition. One thing that has caught me out is to be quite vigilant about checking the leading and trailing edges of the rotors. I clipped a couple of things with the first set of rotors that I had on this drone. Didn't really notice that the noise of the drone had gone up, but the more important thing is that the blades were slightly out of balance and they vibrated a lot. So I was getting much shorter run time on my drone, and I was also getting interference between drone and controller. And then I suppose all of it kind of finishes off with a little bit about building your own drone, making sure that you have airworthy components and stuff like that. For me, that wasn't really important. I had a look through it, but it didn't really sink in, I must admit, so I read it. And I don't think it even came up in the test that I did, so I suppose that was a good thing. So congratulations, if you've made it this far in the video, you probably have the willpower to get through what you need to learn to do the test to get your drone license. So well done. So now go out there, get your drone license sorted out, and then go fly your drone safely. Let me know in the comments below what kind of videos or photos you're taking with your drone, if you're into that kind of thing. I'd be really interested. I'm really into the whole idea of using drone videography as an add-on to my YouTube videos, and that's why I was found it so important to go and get the drone license, so I can continue to make better and better YouTube videos. Hopefully you agree, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.